Someone's been pounding on my neighbor's door in the middle of the night for the last few weeks. I should never have confronted them. I've lived in a small apartment complex for close to 10 years now. It's a small, one-bedroom affair that, being built in the late 70s, is extremely old-fashioned in its decor, but the rent has always been decent. The landlord has always been accommodating when I have a problem, and for the most part, the neighbors have been quiet and haven't caused a fuss. Aside from the occasional homeless person dumpster diving for cans in the middle of the night, or a television played slightly too loud from downstairs, it's always been rather easy for me to fall asleep. Until my new neighbor moved in a few weeks ago. At first, I didn't think anything negative would come with her. She was a friendly, if rather reclusive woman who appeared to be in her mid to late 30s. From what I picked up from our limited conversations when meeting at the mailboxes or gathering laundry, she was a recovering addict who'd successfully made a clean break from the life, and had moved here to try and start over. As someone who has lost a few friends to addictions, I felt sympathetic and always was polite and friendly when we saw each other. And, for the first few weeks of her living here, all was well. And then the banging began. I'd woken up at about 2 in the morning to have to use the bathroom and was washing my hands when I heard it. Or, I should say that I first felt it more than heard it. The vibration that came through the floor was enough to give me pause. What the hell? Drying my hands quickly, I pulled open the bathroom door and stepped out into the living room. A moment later, it came again, but this time, I heard it. Someone was at one of my neighbor's doors. And they weren't just knocking, they were practically pounding on it. I groaned softly at my first thought. Oh great, not the cops again. We'd just had them over a few weeks ago due to an altercation that a rather belligerent homeless woman had had with my next-door neighbor as they'd stood outside having a cigarette. But then the banging came again, and I realized something. Whoever was doing the banging wasn't saying a word. No yelling or orders typical of either police, or simply an argument between a couple or something. The realization made me feel a little bit wary, and I eyed the closed blinds that covered the window that opened onto the second-floor walkway. For a moment, I debated on sliding a finger through them, parting them enough to peek outside. But as I toyed with the notion, suddenly, the banging stopped. The world outside went silent, save for the barking of a dog somewhere a few blocks away. I stood there for another second, listening to see if I could hear the sounds of footsteps. But it remained quiet. After a few seconds, I shrugged my shoulders and turned back to my bedroom. Whatever. I'll figure it out in the morning, I thought as I closed my bedroom door and climbed back into bed. The next day, as I grabbed my mail, I saw my new neighbor, whose name I'd learned was Aaron, enter the laundry room that also doubled as our mailroom. We each said good morning to each other, and after exchanging pleasantries, I decided to ask her about the banging. "Oh, no. You heard that?" she asked me, an apoplectic look etching itself onto her face. I nodded. After a second's silence, she answered, her voice filled with an apologetic tone. "I am so sorry. That was one of my friends. He'd swung by to drop off my laptop. I left it at his place when I was in the middle of moving at 2 in the morning." I mentally wondered, but chose not to say it aloud. After all, I didn't want to appear to be. Instead, I just smiled at her. "Well, just, in the future, let your friends know that things are supposed to be quiet here after 10. I just don't want to see you get in trouble." She nodded immediately, giving a smile of her own. "Of course, thank you for giving me the heads up," she said, locking her mailbox and heading for the door. Thinking that was the end of it, I left the mailroom, got into my car and went to work. The day passed by normally, and after stopping by the grocery store to buy a frozen pizza, I returned home and gorged myself on it while watching a marathon of classic horror movies. I shut the TV off around 11, dumped my dishes into the sink to do tomorrow, and after brushing my teeth, slipped into bed. It took about half an hour of getting comfortable, but eventually, I fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. Bang. 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 The sound ripped me out of the pleasant dream I'd been having, and my eyes snapped open. I glanced at my alarm clock. The red letters read 2:15 a.m. As I lay there, wondering whether the sound had come from my dreams or not, it came again. 3 rhythmic bangs, then a few seconds of silence before 3 more. My mind, still only half awake, slowly began turning. Then, it suddenly clicked. I let out a groan. "Oh, you've got to be freaking kidding me!" I threw off the covers and slid out of bed. 2 nights in a row? I'd already had my doubts about Erin's story of a friend returning something. This was piling it on more. I opened my bedroom door and stepped out into the living room. The walkway lights glowed softly through the closed blinds, and I moved over to them. For another 30 seconds, I stood there in the dark, listening to the person pounding on the door. Then, exactly as before, the banging stopped. Silence fell, and this time, after a few seconds of contemplation, I pulled down one of the blinds and peered outside. I had a perfect view across the way to Erin's front door, the walkway lights revealing nobody. I angled the blinds up farther, looking down at the parking lot and the stretch of road visible. Not a soul was visible anywhere out there. How the hell did they get down to the ground and out of sight so quickly? The last knock came less than 15 seconds ago. For a moment, I thought about unlocking the door and sticking my head out, but pushed the thought away as a yawn escaped my lips. I'd speak to Erin tomorrow if I saw her. For now, I needed to get some more sleep so I wouldn't go to work tired. I didn't see her the next day, or when I got home that night. As I unlocked my front door, I heard the door behind me open. Turning, I found myself staring at the tired eyes of David, my next-door neighbor. "Have you been hearing someone banging away on someone's door the last 2 nights?" he asked grumpily. I nodded. He let out a sigh. "Well, hopefully it doesn't happen again, because it's getting on my nerves," he said, before slamming his door shut. "Most of my neighbors will complain when something gets on their nerves, but for whatever reason, whether it's that they don't want to be seen as a squeak or are just too beat down from everyday life, don't ever call management or confront the person causing problems." This was just another textbook case of that. As I pushed my door open, I shot a final look across at Erin's door. I'd given a moment's thought to knocking on her door, but decided against it and headed inside. I didn't know the woman at all, and I didn't know who was coming in the middle of the night either. And given the fact of her old life, it could be someone less than scrupulous banging away. The last thing I wanted to do was get involved with something that could end badly for me. I forced myself to forget it as I cooked dinner and played video games before hitting the hay. I prayed that I wouldn't be woken up again. But I was. This time, I flung the covers off of me and went straight to my front door, irritation bubbling up inside. Grabbing my jacket off the hook and sliding into my flip-flops, I unlocked the front door and reached for the handle. But something stopped me. I couldn't explain what it was, but it was the oddest sensation I've ever felt. It was as if something were incessantly telling me not to open the door. And it was enough to make me hesitate for a few seconds. Just like the last 2 nights, the banging suddenly stopped. Forcing the warning away, I grasped the handle and turned it, yanking the door open. The chilly fall night washed over me as I blinked rapidly against the blinding porch light. Stepping outside, I turned and looked around the corner, expecting to see whoever had been wailing on the door to be making a break for the stairs. To my shock, I saw nobody. That's freaking impossible. The knocking stopped less than 5 seconds ago. Somebody wouldn't have been able to get downstairs and out of sight so quickly. Feeling thoroughly confused, I pulled the door shut behind me and stepped out onto the walkway. Glancing around, I still saw no one. I turned to look at Erin's apartment. The blinds were drawn, and I saw no light emanating from behind them. I scoffed. The woman can sleep through that racket? As I stood there, a feeling suddenly fell over me. A shiver shot up my spine, causing me to gasp aloud as the feeling of being watched from behind overtook me. And whoever was doing the staring was definitely not friendly. I realized with another shiver that I'd left my back open to the stairs behind me. The perfect place for someone to sneak up on you. My heart began to thunder in my chest, and my breathing came in short gasps as a wave of instinctive fear surged through me. Tightening every muscle in my body, I snapped my fist closed and spun around, ready to sock someone in the face.